Hey there, everyone. Welcome to my Bloodborne retrospective. For those, I haven't done one of these in a while, so for those of you that don't know what that means, it basically means that I beat Bloodborne recently, and I'm going to talk about it. So, pretty awesome stuff. Bloodborne is obviously a little bit of a new experience for me. It's not the kind of game that I typically play. I'm very much into story-heavy RPGs with a whole lot of stuff to break down and analyze, and Bloodborne isn't that. The best way I can describe Bloodborne for anyone who hasn't played it, or the Soulsborne series in general, is that Bloodborne is a skill-focused game that is all about execution and overcoming adversity. It has a really deep plot. There is a lot of stuff going on, but the plot isn't the point of Bloodborne. It's one of those, they present you with a mystery and they give you the blocks in order to solve the mystery, but they don't make solving the mystery the purpose of the game. And you end up having to do a lot of research in order to really start to piece together what's actually happening in the game, which isn't bad. I actually appreciate that. I think that's a pretty cool way of going about it. And the reason I think it's a cool way of going about it is simply because there's a lot of games that, you know, they allow the story to a certain extent to get in the way of the game, and for a deep RPG like I normally play, that's fine. I'm not criticizing the games I love, but for a game like Bloodborne where the engagement is the gameplay, I can understand why they don't want a lot of, narrative cutscenes, cutting in and like making you stop playing the game in order to go that. They give you all the information that you need in order to delve into the story if you choose to. But if you just want to have fun with a, punishing but fair game, go for it. The experience of playing Bloodborne, and I don't know if this is the same for the Soul series as a whole, but it's really interesting. Bloodborne is the game that taught you how to play the game better than any game I've ever played. I distinctly remember years and years ago, I was fighting something very early in Persona 4, and I threw myself at this boss about 7 or 8 times and just could not beat the damn thing. And eventually I got frustrated and I said, well, I guess I just have to get a couple more levels. And I went back and I fought maybe like 6 or 7 enemies, and then Yukiko gained a level and gained Medea. Or media, or what the light cure all spell. And then I went and just stomped the boss to the ground, because that was the difference. And so a lot of the games that I'm used to, yes, your tactics matter, but a good half of whether or not you will win in a fight is what skills your characters have by virtue of how much you've leveled them. With Bloodborne, that's not the case at all. Maybe like 10% is what skills your character has and what level you've acquired with them. The vast majority of whether you'll be okay at Bloodborne is your execution, because you can avoid attacks very effectively. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Tales of Grace's gameplay, where if you sidestepped with perfect timing, not only would you avoid the attack, but it would actually give you meter in order to, be able to attack back. So if you were really good, you could continuously sidestep and advance through their attacks and just keep your own combo going. Like, you never had to stop attacking if you were really good at avoiding their attacks. Normally you'd have to stop and let your meter recharge, but in Grace's, you never had to if you were really on top of it. And that's kind of the same way Bloodborne is. If you're really good, you can dodge through their attacks and be in a position to keep laying that damage on, and they can't actually hurt you. But needless to say, it's tough to be that good. By the end of the game, I had died over 600 times. So, yeah. And to be fair, I did play the Old Hunters DLC, and that DLC was at least 200 of the 600 deaths. It was nuts. So the games are very, very punishing, and that's the other thing I want to talk about. I know I'm just kind of gushing about Bloodborne right now, but it's a really, really fun game. It's a really, really well-made game, well-executed game. I really, really like Bloodborne. The other thing that Bloodborne does that is amazing is as you very, very routinely will run into a boss, and about 3 seconds later you'll be dead, and your response will be, how? And in repeat attempts and in figuring out the boss and watching its moves, you overcome the impossible is the best way I can describe it. You will have an experience where a boss seems utterly impossible to overcome. And then, an hour later, you'll have it defeated. The, prey slaughtered will come across, and it just feels amazing. It is easily one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. It's just this execution, this boss that just is this barrage of lethality, and you've learned its pattern, you know how to avoid, you know what it's going to do, you're avoiding all of its attacks with perfect timing, and then it gets in position, and you get that backstab and a visceral right into its back, and it feels so amazing. I definitely cussed out Bloodborne on a couple of occasions. There are some bosses that were absolutely ridiculous, and I feel like pushed the envelope too hard, but when it works so well. It is a deeply addictive game. I do think it's difficult. I mean, it's a hard game, but it's not an unfair game most of the time, and that's the difference. Super Meat Boy is the best analogy I could give to it, because Super Meat Boy is another difficult game, but when you die in Super Meat Boy, you died in Super Meat Boy. It's not like the game was unfair to you. It was. The controls were crisp, and you had an input error, and that's why you died. And Bloodborne's the same way. When you die, okay, it may not be your fault. It may be the first time you fought a boss, but it's still... Bloodborne isn't doing anything underhanded or tricky. If you pay attention, you can see almost everything that's coming, at least in the main game. And this brings me to one of my two overwhelming complaints about Bloodborne. The DLC. The DLC is really, really good up through the first 3 bosses. Unfortunately, the final boss of the DLC and the optional boss of the DLC really, they push the envelope too hard, and they cross the line between challenging and fun. And you just get to the point where you're not enjoying fighting the boss because the boss is just simply too ridiculous. To explain without spoilers, the final boss of the DLC, Phase 1 is absolutely fine. Phase 1, the boss is crazy, you've got to have good timing, he has a wide variety of attacks, he has like 10 different attacks or something, you've got to learn them all, but you can get through it, you can put on the hurt, there's opportunities for you to counterplay, and it's fine. The second phase of the DLC is at least partially RNG based. The boss goes flipping nuts and starts jumping around the arena, dropping bombs everywhere. You lose tracking on it, so half the time you can't keep up with where the boss even is. And after it jumps around and attacks like 5 or 6 times, it will get exhausted and you'll be able to get a couple of hits in, if it happened to stop near you. But that's the problem. That's why it's RNG based. It's like very, very often you're trying to avoid attacks you can't see coming because the tracking breaks and you don't know where the boss is. And it's completely up to RNG whether the game will allow you to get any hits in. The final boss of the DLC took me, I want to say it was like 130 something tries, maybe 140 something tries. I don't remember the exact number. And when I finally beat it, it's not because to a certain degree I outplayed it, but a lot of it was because I happened to get lucky and the boss kept stopping close enough that I could get a backstab in. And the previous attempts weren't really any different than the final attempt. It's just the boss didn't stop close enough to me that I might be able to get a hit or two in, but I couldn't actually do any significant damage to the boss because of where it happened to stop. And to me, that really goes against the whole point of Bloodborne and the Souls series. They should be challenging, they should be punishing, they should be brutal, but when you win because you outplay the boss, not because there are RNG factors that happen to go in your favor. And that really frustrated me, as I'm sure you can tell. The other big problem, and this is a problem with the main game, but it's a problem that the DLC only exacerbates. Bloodborne operates on a system of autosaves. Basically, you make your character, and then the game autosaves every time you do anything for the most part. It does not allow you to maintain separate save files unless you gimmick the system. Like, if you copy your save file to a external drive or to the online storage, well then yeah, you can copy it back and overwrite your current save or something like that. But for the most part, the game only allows you to have one save. Now, why is this bad? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, it's really hard to go back and... Because, what I would do in a game like Bloodborne in a second is I would make a separate save file right before when I ran into a boss and I was going to keep fighting the boss. That way I could go back and re-experience that fight at the level I was. Be able to see how far I had come, see how much better I was at executing the fight. And yeah, I can make a new character and go to that fight again, but are my stats the same? What items do I have? Am I using the same weapon? It's like there's so many variables in the game that I don't know if I'm winning the second time around because I'm just better, or do I happen to have a loadout that's more effective on the boss, or did I happen to grind more and so I'm over leveled in this play? I don't know. If I had a save file from where I fought him the first time, I would know for a fact, yes, this is me, I get to re-experience this battle again, and it would be amazing. But you can't. Bloodborne saves over your damn save. And what's even worse about it is that at the end of the game, slight spoiler on this one, but at the very end of the game, Bloodborne resets itself. Effectively, there are 3 endings, of which I have seen 1, and then once you get it, it kicks you straight into New Game Plus. So if you want to see the 3 endings, you have to play the game 3 times. Even worse, if you buy the DLC, and thankfully I did not run into this one because people warned me, but if you buy the DLC, you gotta play through the game again if you're in New Game Plus. You can't just go to a menu and activate the DLC. No, it's in the game, and it's really designed for being at the end of the game. So you're kind of screwed on that one because they won't let you have multiple save files, and the game deletes its progress as soon as you beat it. I mean, sure, it will save what items you have and let you go to New Game Plus, but the other thing I heard, and I don't know if this is a thing for a fact, is that the DLC is overtuned for New Game Plus, so it's super punishing if you go that route anyway. So it's just a problem, guys. It's the lack of separate save files is a massive, massive problem in my eyes. Lastly, don't take my bitching the wrong way. I do really like Bloodborne. I find the DLC was a little bit overtuned. The DLC, I made this comment on stream. If you guys ever played Guitar Hero 1 and 2 were amazing. You felt like a rock star, man. You're playing, The first time I got through Bark at the Moon on the original Guitar Hero, I felt like amazing. It was a super exhilarating experience. I was just, I was eating that thing, I was playing it. It was really, really hard, but it was great. And the Guitar Hero 3, I don't exactly know how they did this, but they made Guitar Hero no longer be fun. The songs got to the point where they were difficult without, it felt like artificial difficulty. It didn't feel like I'm having a hard time playing this because the song is hard. I felt like I'm having a hard time playing this because the developers are dicks. And that's kind of the same way the DLC in Bloodborne felt to me. It's like, okay, the curve of challenge is not realistic in this DLC, and so you just get frustrated. And the other thing, and granted, I knew this would happen, when I did get to the final boss of the actual game, because I had to save that because the game bloody resets, then I just one-shotted it. It wasn't even a challenge because I'd been struggling so hard against the DLC's harder bosses that this guy, I mean, I was super good at avoiding all of his attacks. So that also sucked. Lastly, you know, I know I just spent a while complaining about, you know, a couple of... The really thing is, Bloodborne is such a labor of love. They spend so long on the city. The atmosphere is amazing. You just feel genuinely creeped out and intrigued as you go through it. Bloodborne is... It's not a horror game, but it's what a horror game wants to be, because you feel genuinely unsafe when you're playing Bloodborne. You're going around and you are terrified. You don't know what's around each corner, and then just the ambience and the music and the atmosphere just make you feel small and vulnerable, and it's really, really well handled. I do not necessarily think that I will, you know, be playing Dark Souls 1. I may play Dark Souls 2 and 3 on stream because I've heard they're better. Dark Souls 1 is so passive compared to Bloodborne, I think it would just frustrate me. But I will say, if you have a PlayStation 4, play Bloodborne, accept that you will die a lot, and learn from it. It's not, again... Almost all of the time, it's difficult, it's brutal, it will kill you, but it doesn't do it unfairly. And that's the brilliance of Bloodborne.